Thank you everyone for joining. So happy to see so many familiar but also new faces here today. Thank you so much for taking the time, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third ETIN seminar on Innovation-Enhancing Procurement. So those of you who have joined for our last seminars, we had the first seminar talking about demand acceleration, so the framework that Jakob and Lina introduced. Then we talked last time about the case example of innovation-enhancing procurement in Georgia, as well as in Norway, based on their cooperation. And now we have the pleasure to review and look at lessons learned for procurement and innovation for smart, sustainable cities. So thank you very much to Warren Smith and to John Davies for hosting this session and for getting together such an impressive line of speakers.
So, as Emanuela said, this is part of the work we do in ETIN, and we will talk about that in the introduction. And today's topic is procurement and innovation for smart, sustainable cities and what you have done in this project. And actually, we met, was it a couple of months ago, I think, Lina, me, Warren and John met, and we immediately realized that we were working on the same topic and shared a lot of mutual values and experiences. So we're really looking forward to this. And the agenda for today looks like follows, if I just can, yes. Short introduction, why we're here. And then the main theme for today is to have a review and see what lessons you have learned in the work with procurement and innovation for smart, sustainable cities. And then very, very important, as well as Emanuela pointed out, that we want those sessions to be highly interactive and make it possible to reflect on what we are hearing, discuss what we are hearing, share experiences. So briefly, we will divide this in 45 minutes of presentation, and the rest of it is left for reflections and discussions. And yeah, we're highly interactive and we trust each other, so this will be really, really fun, actually. But first, a short introduction to ETIN and the workstream Innovation-Enhancing Procurement. And Emanuela, could you just briefly give ETIN and this workstream short introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. So for those of you who are not as familiar with ETIN, it stands for the UNECE Transformative Innovation Network, which is a strategic platform and meeting place for peer learning and collaboration around the topic of transformative innovation. So under our network, we have a larger theme of ecosystem development. So how can we strengthen ecosystems to facilitate transformation, larger socio-technical transformations. And of course, an important element of this is the demand side. So how do we increase demand for such innovations? And that is why, with big thanks to Lina and Jakob for the initiative, we have started this work stream on innovation-enhancing procurement for transformation, where we are looking at different frameworks, methodologies for innovation-enhancing procurement that can that are being used across our member states. And to see, okay, what lessons can we learn, what challenges we're faced, and what opportunities do we see moving forward. So we've created this work stream a couple of months ago already, and we've already had two really great seminars. So we're very excited to have a third one now and looking into it yet again, another case example of the UK and how that's being done there. And on the outcomes, so we hope to really gather the insights, the learnings from these discussions, and then consolidate them into a policy paper later on. So where we invite you to also provide your input and collaborate with us on this. And then hopefully we will have a few nice case examples that we can then disseminate further on. And of course, hopefully also develop a strategic roadmap going forward. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that, Jacob or Lina.
No, it looks great, I think.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that introduction, Emanuela. So, with those words, let's dig into today's topic, which is once again review and lessons learned from procurement and innovation for smart, sustainable cities. And this session will be led by Warren and John. So I will hand over to you, and just please note also that it's really important that we have time for discussions. So please head for let's say now we are in different time zones, but let's say 45 minutes from now then. So we also have time to discuss and reflect on what we are hearing. So please, I would like to hand over to Warren and John.
There we go. Sorry, I was looking for the button. Goodness, can you see the screen that's showing? Hopefully, the slide that's the
Yes.
title slide.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. So you can still see it. Not too many things open. Good. Okay. Thank you, Jakob and Lena, for the opportunity to join you today. It's really great conversations we've had so far. I think. As you can see from the title, I'm being somewhat provocative, but I think heralding a digital commercial renaissance in our public sector is kind of the things that we've been talking about between John and I in our network, but also with Sam. And I think hopefully we'll get very quickly to the other speakers because I'm really eager to hear their perspectives. So yeah, we got 3 excellent speakers who've joined us today. So they'll introduce themselves when they get to their segments. So moving on, I think I just wanted to kind of frame this really by stating that we've an overarching kind of hypothesis that unites all the speakers for today's IEP task force webinar. And this is that by applying truly digital skills, working practices, culture, behaviors, and mindsets to commercial and pre-commercial procurement, public sector organizations can support more innovative and innovation-enhancing procurement approaches when working constructively and collaboratively with the market and entrepreneurs. And it's the following principles and practices that characterize such approaches: empowering, trusting, and funding teams who are multidisciplinary and cross-functional. So that spans both digital data and technology teams, as well as commercial and also other relevant policy areas, depending on what the problems you're trying to solve. So that could be health equality or cybersecurity or whatever. Also focusing on solving real problems to better meet user needs, working transparently and being open and honest about these problems and the constraints that teams are working within. That could be legacy technology, funding, skills shortages and capacity, etc. And also focusing on outcomes to achieve greater social value impact. And to achieve this, that means embracing experimentation by targeting small, relatively speaking, incremental investments towards rapidly learning what works and what doesn't. And this includes testing your riskiest assumptions and sensibly using new technological capabilities done ethically, inclusively, and transparently, having experimented practically with how these might solve the real problems. It also means embracing agility, allowing for quicker pivots and adjustments as the project evolves and learnings increase, and also proactively monitoring service delivery, evaluating achievements of social value impacts, and capturing stories of change throughout that process. So this is kind of like our pitch, if you like, for what binds the different speakers in today's conversation. So moving to the next slide, that works, I think. Yes, it does. Good. So this hypothesis and these truly digital principles and practices have guided and framed our work through the UN's specialized ICT agency, the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, and the United for Smart Sustainable Cities U4SSC Global UN Initiative. U4SSC provides an international platform for information exchange and partnership building to guide cities and communities in achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. U4SSC is coordinated by the ITU, UNECE, and also the UN Human Settlements Programme, UN Habitat, and it's supported by a further 16 UN agencies and programmes. The Procurement for Smart Sustainable Cities thematic group that John and I lead was created following a presentation that I gave at the 9th Green Standards Week, which was held in Valencia in Spain in October 2019. And this is when I was a senior official working for the UK Government Digital Service, where I was the director of the Global Digital Marketplace Programme, which is how John and I met, actually. And what began with a number of in-country engagements with national and local governments across Colombia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico, and South Africa had to switch entirely to online engagement out of necessity due to the COVID-19 global health pandemic. And so a year later, in October 2020, we launched the Digital Buying Guide. There's a link there to a blog post that talks about that. And it's for this initial phase, we wanted to demonstrate that a very different approach was possible to presenting guidance on public procurement, one that's digital first, that is human-centered, design-led, and developed iteratively and fully compliant to AA standard for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines from the World Wide Web Consortium. You can read more about that by following the link to that blog post. Digital Buying Guide laid the foundations for our main U4SSC deliverable, the Procurement Guidelines for Smart Sustainable Cities, which were published in May last year, following an extensive review and approval by the 90 UN agencies and programs involved with the U4SSC Global Initiative. And this guide contains practical steps to take throughout the commercial life cycle, and it's illustrated with case studies from public sector organisations from both national and municipal organisations from around the world. So why the guidelines are crucial? The governments in developed and developing countries, north and south, are facing increasingly complex challenges, overlapping crises like COVID-19, the climate and nature emergency, widening inequalities, conflict and the displacement of people that it causes, the infodemic of misinformation and cybercrime, etc., all converge in our cities. And so we see cities being both uniquely vulnerable, but also best positioned to be used to coordinate multi-stakeholder efforts to help tackle these overlapping crises. Yet public procurement is one of the most critical yet under-leveraged areas, we believe, spanning public policy, governance, transparency, and accountability. And it's absolutely critical that sustainable development principles act as the overarching framework to guide all public sector decisions, be that on budgeting and allocations of funding, recruitment and professional development, use of digital data and technology, etc., etc. And it's in this regard, procurement is no exception, and it sits at the public sector demand and supply nexus. So briefly plugging the speakers to follow, by embracing the art of the possible, we'll come back to that, in public procurement, we can give future generations a voice. And this requires an unwavering focus on balancing today's short-term needs with the needs to safeguard long-term needs to ensure the well-being of our people and the planet. So moving on, if that works, yeah. The guidelines represent a new digital commercial paradigm, as we describe it. That is modern public procurement that helps organizations to embrace more holistic whole of government approaches to acquiring digital data and technology products, services, and capabilities. And it's these approaches that are more transparent, innovative, efficient, and effective, that also support stimulating and opening up the public procurement supply market to a broader range of entities, such as micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and also voluntary community and social enterprises. A digital commercial approach helps to create enabling environments within public administrations that encourages greater innovation and continuous improvement, where anybody should feel trusted and empowered to constructively challenge institutionally ingrained custom and practice. And this is more about folklore than it is about actual law. But I'll leave Rebecca to talk much more expertly about that in her segment. Such approaches support organizations to embrace more collaborative ways of working, to co-design and co-deliver better policies, solutions, and services by putting users at the very heart of the problem solving. And this means bringing together multiple stakeholders, multiple sectors, to approach those policies, the solutions, the development of services in more deliberative and participatory ways rather than traditional arm's length or opaque or isolated approaches that time and time again result in far from optimal delivery. And ultimately, all of these approaches must come together with a focus on social purpose to deliver social value for money and achieve positive impacts for the communities that governments are there to serve. Moving on, so the guidelines are also for anybody who engages in procurement activities, so not just procurement practitioners, and that could be local, regional, or national governments. They focus on digital data and technology, product services capabilities, as it's these topics and solutions that are most needed to support public sector transformation. And the information that we provide is intended to be relevant internationally and not specific to any particular regulatory environment. The guidelines bring together all aspects of the digital commercial paradigm, and we've presented it in such a way that officials can implement them in accordance with their own priorities and also their areas of greatest need based on their contextual challenges. Organizations can use the guidelines to operationalize this new paradigm, mainstreaming accessible, human-centered design, data-driven and open approaches in public procurement. While currently the exception, we believe that this is an absolutely critical change of mindset, culture and behavior, and traditional approaches that were suited to the ways of the past are actually long overdue for reform. This requires administrations to invest in multidisciplinary and cross-functional teams, and it's essential that these teams are founded on honesty, transparency, collaboration and integrity. And it's these modern ways of working that underpin the Sustainable Development Principles. I've already mentioned that public procurement is one of the most critical yet under-leveraged areas of public policy, governance, transparency and accountability. And we believe that these guidelines serve as the fulcrum that supports this lever to pivot to advance public procurement approaches that are fit for the 21st century, moving away from narrow, compliance-led, process-oriented and siloed approaches. And in so doing, we improve the opportunities to achieve inclusive, equitable and sustainable policy outcomes that have a positive economic, social and cultural and environmental impact. Seizing the opportunities provided by digital government, open data and new technologies throughout the pool public investment life cycle, from planning and informing the market to evaluating and awarding and managing delivery, we can help prevent corruption, fraud and bribery and sustainably meet the needs of communities now and for future generations. So that leads me to my segue to our next speaker, Sam Markey. And also, so John and I are also contributors to the World Economic Forum G20 Global Smart Cities Alliance Innovation-Friendly Procurement Model Policy. There's a link there, but without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sam because he will be covering that and the work of the World Economic Forum more broadly. So over to you, Sam, when I've figured out how to stop sharing my screen. I think that's already happened anyway. So yeah, thank you. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you. Hopefully you can now see my slide. Can't see any of you, so someone say yes.
Fine. Yeah, so
no.
we did.
Oh, okay. I'll try that again. Hang on 1 second. Perhaps in the transition between me and Warren, it got.
Yep, it's there.
Great.
Yes.
I'm going to speak very briefly because you've got two actual procurement experts after me. I am a policy wonk who has been inspired and kind of drawn into the world of procurement, innovation procurement, and have seen its potential to transform public service delivery and a whole bunch of policy goals. So as Warren said, it's my privilege to co-chair the Innovation Procurement Task Force at the G20 Global Smart Cities Alliance, which is an initiative of the World Economic Forum. I'll share the slides afterwards because the ones that I've been sent have got far too many words on for you to read. But essentially, the Alliance is in very many ways similar to this initiative and to Warren's in seeking to promote collaboration and partnership globally around areas of common interest, in this case, specifically around smart and sustainable cities and urbanization, not just in the sense of digital technologies, but also in the embedded carbon and green economy and all sorts of aspects of place. And the initiative has been running for several years. It was launched in 2019 as part of Japan's presidency of the G20, and has a whole range of task forces like this. Again, this is the kind of the objectives of the program to strengthen policy innovation, to incentivize process, and to enable adoption around the world. And this is all centered in particular on the Urban Transformation Summit that took place last year in Detroit, and in this coming year in San Francisco, and brings together a range of leaders from around the world to advance these conversations. One example that's closely aligned to the area of work that Warren is working in is Istanbul, who've been very active users and engagement with this program, and they've had a particular focus on their ICT procurement and innovation. It's getting dark in this room. I'm going to wave and see if it turns the lights back on. I don't know why it's getting dark. Smart rooms. But specifically, the innovation-friendly procurement task force that I chair, co-chair, we've been meeting for a little over a year, or 18 months really. We launched this model policy earlier in the year, which I'll briefly summarize in a moment. You've got a link to it. Like this initiative, it's a multinational cross-sector conversation with the private sector, the public sector, academic leaders to synthesize and to promote best practice. And the key idea really, which caught my attention, is this idea that if just 5% of the 300 billion US dollars that world cities spend on goods and services every year was brought to market in a more innovation-friendly, more inclusive way, it would fund NASA 12.5 times over. So this is the kind of innovation fuel that's available to us, even from a very small change to how the money we already spend on roads and public services, waste collection, and all sorts of other things. So the big idea behind this is less about a tool, because as this conversation demonstrates, there are lots of people out there creating tools, creating knowledge, creating great resources, and rather a call to arms to see more of this funding channeled in this kind of innovation-friendly way. There are three kind of key buckets of recommendations which will be familiar to you as others working in this space. One, around purpose-driven procurement, setting challenges rather than defining the specific activity, and being willing to take slightly longer in testing and validating novel solutions rather than just going for the established. As Warren touched on, a really key thing around culture and the empowerment of teams to help steer and advocate and create change of culture, and other colleagues after me will speak more detail about what we're doing in the UK to support that. And a significant focus on reaching beyond the usual suspects and investment in communications and engagement with the market. Again, there's a lot of anxiety, I think, particularly in the UK, around what you can and can't say to suppliers in advance. And so there's a focus here in our work on encouraging more active dialogue. So again, I say too much on these reads for you slides for you to read. I'll share them afterwards so that you can digest them in more detail. But more important, I think, you get on to Rakesh, who will tell you about a new initiative we set up in the UK to drive this work forwards, and then Rebecca, who is one of our board members, who's been doing some specific work on the art of the possible. So Rakesh, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. And I'll just get the slides up on screen. Okay, I'm hoping you can see that. Is that? Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, Sam, thank you very much. Warren, thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for this invitation. So I'll talk a little bit about the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre. So I'm the head of the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre, and I'll give a brief overview of that. But also previous to this, I was on Mayor Khan's Smart London board. So we're trying to make London the smartest city in the world by bringing new innovation in. I was also at Transport for London for 22 years, where I had the Open Innovation team, whereas a £12 billion buying agency, we're thinking about how do we create new value. I also do some lecturing at the Royal College of Arts and at Harvard University. But in terms of IPEC, the keyword here is empowerment. And it's the stuff that Sam and Warren spoke about, is how do we create that right culture, the right mindset that allows you to create new value and achieve better, quicker, cheaper outcomes based on the policy goals that you're trying to achieve. And we're working very closely through IPEC, whether it's at a local level, whether it's at a regional level, or at a national level. So we're both engaging closely with the public sector, who's the buyer, but also we're working very closely with the supply chain. In particular, diversifying that supply chain. So whether you're a startup or a scale up, is how you get access to some of those public sector contracts and add more value. Just to run through some numbers, broadly speaking, the UK spends about £380 billion a year on public procurement, and 70 billion of that is spent by local agencies and local authorities. And 23% of bids that are received only receive a single bidder. So clearly that is a challenge in terms of diversifying your supply chain and getting value for money. And 5% of suppliers that are asked feels that procurement actually helps to incentivize innovation. So this, and I remember at Transport for London when I ran a survey with our supply chain or near supply chain, everyone said it was easy to work with us. We paid on time. We were a good relationship holder. But where they said we struggled the most was it was hard to innovate with us. So people were bringing innovative ideas, but they just didn't know where to take them. So on the next slide, I mean, this has come out of Tussle, which just illustrates the level of spend, both at a central, local, and NHS level, and some others. And it illustrates that local government in particular is a big spender when it comes to procurement. So that's quite an interesting piece, that it doesn't always have to be at the national level where you want to drive change. You can also do this locally. And what's quite clear, whether you're in the UK or whether you're in cities across Europe or the world, is the need to do more for less has never been so vital. And if we think about the context around the climate emergency, around aging populations, around crime, health, and social care, they're all big challenges. And what we're seeing in the UK following the pandemic are challenges that councils are struggling to deliver all the services that they need to deliver. And what that means is if you're trying to achieve those goals, you've got to bring more innovation in, and you've got to be open and more vulnerable in some aspects with the problems that you have, and engage with the market as early as possible so you can see what's out there and be that intelligent client. But also what's critical is, and this is a challenge that I faced quite often with chief technical officers, technology officers, and chief engineering officers, is innovation isn't invention. Innovation is about bringing new ways to ultimately achieve citizen outcomes and achieve better citizen outcomes. So Warren touched on this about human-centered design. We've got to really think about what are the problems that society is facing and contextualize them, and then think about what the innovation is. But far too often, I see internal innovation inventing new things that potentially could have bought from the market and accelerated much faster. And we also need to challenge the status quo. So I've done this for effect, and you can put any stakeholders in here or any cities or regions in there. But if we think about how innovation in the past has been done in the public sector, is either the innovation has been done internally. So you have these secret teams that are funded through existing resources that are hidden cost, who are innovating and inventing new things. Or if they're stuck, what happens is then they go to the market and those overprescribe to the market exactly what they want. But what my challenge here is that as a result of advances in technologies, we're seeing academic spin-outs, we're seeing startups, we're seeing scale-ups, we're seeing accelerator programs like the Connected Places Catapult, we're seeing venture capitalists. The amount of venture capitalists that have approached me in my old role to say, where should we be investing our money to make the city better? Or we're seeing large corporates now with open innovation functions. So the point here is, how can the public sector entity be the curator? By being much more vulnerable with its problems and sharing them, how does it go out to the market and say to the market, you know, all that R&D budgets that you have, or that innovation that you're looking to develop, well, here's some problems to focus on. Whereas quite far too often we do that too late. We do it, as I said, when we overprescribe and then go to the market. Also, the public, and we're developing a toolkit at the moment, is the public sector, it's quite clear, needs to be more entrepreneurial. we have commercial colleagues, and I work with some fantastic commercial colleagues, but their starting position is always, I don't want to get sued and I don't want to get challenged. Well, that's a given in your role. Let's build on it and say, how do we get best value? And that means that we need to sort of demystify some of those procurement myths, which I'm sure Rebecca will talk about. But it's like you can talk to the market. You know, what's stopping you from talking to the market if you've designed a tender? But then we procurement colleagues to say, even talking to the market is a bad thing. Or you can only do R&D separate to scaling. Well, that's not true, because you have procedures like the Innovative Partnership Procedure in Europe, and soon to be the Competitive Flexible Procedure in the UK. So there are lots of myths that need to be demystified. So how do we create a culture where our organization is more entrepreneurial and our cities are more entrepreneurial, so they're challenging the market in a different way? And also, you know, is the new technology disruptive from a negative point of view, or is it complementary? And a fundamental point is, what value can be created when you're thinking about innovation? And really start thinking about the hypotheses right at the beginning as you're defining the problem, or after you've defined the problem, to say what's the value that could be created if we solve this problem. Whereas what happens is, far too often, we start with the problem and we just work forward and say, hopefully it'll go somewhere. But we've got to be much more structured as to how we manage innovation, in my view. Otherwise, we fall for the hype. And we've got to be that intelligent client up front. Because the market, let's be honest, if they've invented or developed some new R&D activity, they will be trying to sell it to cities and the public sector because they're a massive market shaper. And then how do we turn some of these challenges into opportunities? Culture is a massive challenge. In the public sector, we worry about the media, we worry about politicians, we worry about stakeholders. That's absolutely right, because we're responsible to the citizen. But that doesn't mean you don't be more entrepreneurial, more innovative. So we need to challenge some of that culture of, I know best. I'm a tech person, so that means that innovation sits with me. That not invented here syndrome. You've got to, you know, in a public sector, you're not one buyer. You've got 18 buyers potentially from across the organization. And all it takes is one of them to say, not a good idea, and suddenly it goes down the rabbit hole. Warren touched on this around clarity of problem statements. Far too often I've sat with senior politicians and directors where we spend, if it's a 2-hour meeting, 10 minutes on the problem. We'll spend 2 hours discussing each other's solutions. Let's do it the other way around. Let's spend more time defining the problem, get the context right, and then think about how can the market help bring that innovation in. Because there'll be lots of people out there with brilliant brains, so we don't have to do it locally. Got to be much better at being open. You know, I sometimes go into procurement portals that feels like I'm navigating a really complicated arena. We want best value, so let's just go out there and be open with our problems and the procurements that we have, and let the market respond. Let's make it easy for them. Sometimes I might describe a problem to you and I'll do it in a human manner, and suddenly I'll translate that into some procurement document and it sounds foreign. It's like, let's just be open with the problem that we have. We need to be really clear on creating test beds and de-risk. So that comes back to the earlier point. Things will go wrong in the innovation space. We should absolutely be pushing the boundaries. But by creating the test beds and safe guardrails, you can sort of de-risk a lot of the sort of hazards. And in the transport context, safety is a big risk. Procurement is a challenge sometimes, but it's not the only challenge. I find procurement colleagues can be your best friends. And they're doing the right thing. They want to make sure you're getting best value. They're making sure they're doing the right modeling and all the other good things. So as an innovator, I used to get quite frustrated with my procurement colleagues. But what I found is by engaging really early and creating the right ways of working, you can add best value and you can create best value. And there's others there as well, which I won't go through. But really quickly, governance is important. Far too often, innovation is done as a standalone thing, and then you bring it back to the mothership. And the mothership says, not good, doesn't work for us for these reasons. Be part of the mothership, be different, be curious, and engage with the market, but make sure you're aligned into internal governance processes. Otherwise, you will not get the budget to scale. And there are lots of case studies. So in London, we applied the Innovative Partnership Procedure for Road Lab, which was to reduce the adverse impact of roadworks. We worked with utility companies across the UK. And then we brought in 9 startups who had 10 weeks to create a business case. We gave them X amount of seed funding. We gave them access to people. We gave them access to the assets. What we found at the end of 10 weeks, there were 2 products that really worked. But when we had those 9 different products, from a procurement point of view, it was frustrating because you're comparing apples, pears, bananas, and mangoes. You're not comparing like for like, so you can't measure on cost. So one aspect we had AR tools, in the other one were physical barriers, another one was modeling, another one was detecting water leaks without digging a road. So suddenly you had all these different solutions. And my procurement colleagues are saying, well, it's hard to measure on cost now. Well, that was absolutely the intent. It's about creating best value from a holistic point of view. When we created business cases, what we learned there is you've got to make sure that you're being objective and fair when you're developing that criteria, but it can be done. And we selected 2, we awarded contracts, multi-million-pound contracts to 2 startups who are now working very closely with some of our tier 1 suppliers. But it doesn't always have to be cash. So I used to run Transport for London's open data program. That created value of £130 million per annum. And we had 17,000 developers that were accessing that data. There were 17,000 brains that could make London better. And the point there is that with Sadiq there, with Mayor Khan, we went out with a problem statement on how do we encourage more people to walk. We're spending millions and millions of dollars to do this. And then we found one startup that crowdsources walking routes. And what they did is when they first started with us, they had 5,000 active users. By the time we finished with them recently, they had 500,000 active users in London. We spent £20,000 on that against all the millions that we're paying on marketing campaigns. So the point there is look far, look wide. And then you can do it with corporates. We've also seen in Sunderland, there's a test bed around 5G where they're partnering with Bolden. And they're testing some fantastic and scaling some fantastic digital connectivity solutions. And we're seeing something similar in Dorset too. So it's fantastic to see a series of colleagues across the UK and Europe apply and the world applying some of these approaches. And the point here is we need to normalize it because it can be done. And then really quickly and in brief, because I'm conscious of time, is what does IPEC do? So IPEC is, we're funded by a government program, Innovate UK, and we're working very closely with Sam and various others. One area is cohorts. So we're now embedding procurement thinking into accelerator programs. We're currently working with up to 9 different agencies across the UK who we're supporting through one particular with 3 separate programs. But the idea there is that we're helping them with the design thinking aspect, we're helping them with the procurement aspect, we're helping them with the change aspect, we're also helping them with the scouting aspect and much more. So how do we run a mission-focused challenge that has every possible chance of scaling at the end? Also, if you're interested, we've just created IPEC Research, which is a constitution between the University of Manchester and Birmingham, and we're bringing other universities in. And the idea there is that we're creating a thought-leading centre to help build the evidence as to why innovation and procurement is important, but also highlighting case studies and then illustrating their impact. So if you do want to get involved with that, please let Sam or I know. And there's much more we're doing. But the other thing I wanted to really touch on is the community side. So I really encourage you to join our LinkedIn page. It's Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre, where we're continuously having a debate about some of these challenges and creating that coalition of the willing that if you people can do this, others can do it too. And suddenly we change that culture in the public sector. And that's the link to the community. So please do join, do share case studies, share knowledge. And of course, if we can help in any way through IPEC, please let Sam or I know. Thank you very much for listening. Do I hand over to, sorry, Warren, yeah.
No, that's it. Thank you, Rakesh. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Warren, and thank you, Rakesh and Sam. Rakesh has really set out the challenges and the opportunities that address those challenges that we're facing in the UK at the moment in the public sector around mindset and culture, but also around capacity and skills as well. And I've been asked today to talk about a report that IPEC has published that I co-authored when I was a very minor cog in this with Sir Malcolm Harbour and Julian Blake, who is another lawyer. I should explain, I'm a partner and I head up our public procurement here at Trowers and Hamlins, and we're headquartered in London, but we're an international law firm, so I'm afraid I'm a lawyer in the room. But I'm going to talk about really the review and the lessons learned that we put into Art of the Possible 2, which was, I've got a rather dully printed out version here, but I know that Warren's going to put the link in the chat so that you can access that directly, and that's on the IPEC website. But really, following on from what Rakesh has said, when it comes to innovation in procurement, what we wanted to re-emphasize in the UK was literally the art of the possible. And it was quite a timely report because in the UK, as you know, we have withdrawn from the European Union, and that has given the politicians certainly the platform to seize back control of our procurement rules. And they've promised that they are being improved in a number of ways. But as my mother would say, the proof will be in the pudding. But Rakesh has mentioned a few of those improvements around flexibility. And what we wanted to ensure was that the clarion cry to use the new procurement rules to procure innovation, or have that innovation mindset, as Sam and Rakesh has talked about, was at the front and centre of contracting authorities, public sector bodies' minds as they got to grips with the new rules. Because as you know, when you get change, people can entrench and just do what they've always done because it's safer, and try and shoehorn into the new rules, into the new legislation, what they've already done. But we wanted them to take an innovative mindset and use the flexibilities created by the reformed rules to secure innovation. And I think that's one of the first points I wanted to talk about. When we were drafting or redrafting the report, we did have discussions about, were we talking about procuring innovation? So what Rakesh has quite clearly shown us through the case studies is that to change culture and mindset, you can procure innovative products and solutions to address common day, everyday suffered problems. Or were we talking about procuring innovatively? So how we approach the market via competition design, who we ask to bid for our contracts, or indeed what we ask them to deliver in terms of social value, in terms of what I call over extras. Were we talking about that? And of course, in the report, we talk about both things, because actually procuring innovation, procuring innovative solutions is difficult, because actually what you're asking contracting authorities to do is procure something that they don't know. They don't know what the if they do what Rakesh says and concentrate on the problem for more than 10 minutes, they get to where the outcome needs to be, or the solution that they desire. But how they get there and what that solution might look like, they might not know at the beginning of that procurement. And so in terms of practicalities and in terms of culture, as Warren says, it's procurement law, LORE, which is custom and practice, not procurement law, which is legislation. All of that comes into play, and therefore that's why we used the report as a real clarion call to say, hey, come on, this is not scary, you can do it, but there are some things you do need to do to enable you to do that. And so one of the things that we talk about in the report and encourage most strongly is pre-market engagement. And I think it was Rakesh's slide that talked about, you know, academia, spin-outs, commercialisation. We've got micros. Warren talked about micros, smalls, VCSEs. There are a lot of companies delivering innovative solutions who are not the normal kind of consumers of public sector procurement. They don't understand how to access government opportunities, and also they don't know what they've got is maybe what's wanted, although they concede that it's definitely needed. So pre-market engagement, where public sector bodies go out to the market in an energetic manner. So they don't go out to what we call tier one contractors, so the big boys here, and say, come and play as you always do. They intrusively go and investigate what is there and start conversations at a really early scoping and defining stage in that sort of life cycle of need, so that they are able not only to get the market view on what is available out there, but also on how that market essentially will engage with them. So you can talk about competition design as well. And you can say, well, look, as a bidder, I can't show you, I can't convince you that mine is the best product without me showing you what it's capable of doing, or without me sandboxing this with you for a couple of months so that I understand your need, you understand your need better, and how my product can develop and meet your needs. And so that's really important stage, and we hope that in the report we've really bigged that up, because actually in our experience, even if you're not trying to procure something innovative, that definition and scoping phase and that market onboarding phase spells the success of or failure of most procurement. So we were really keen to emphasize that. The other things in the report that we've focused on is the capacity and capability of the procurement officers in contracting authorities, and being able to think outside the box. And as Rakesh has said, you know, IPEC are really focusing on trying to boost skills. And in procurement, that is essential, because what the rules are changing. So reform means that officers who have been procuring day in and day out for the last couple of decades now have a new set of rules to get to grips with. But we see that as a real opportunity. It's not just a barrier or a cost. The procurement reforms have an opportunity to really reset people's culture and practice. Because they're new, we don't just have to do what we do day in and day out, but the professionalisation of the procurement sector has to lead in that. And so we do talk about boosting skills, capacity and capability in the procurement sector, because that is essential in order for everybody involved in the procurement of innovation to take advantage of the new rules, but also to sort of have that sort of, well, why not mentality rather than no, which is often what you do get from procurement officers, particularly in local and to some extent central government. So we've talked about pre-market engagement, capacity and capability, and then there's that sort of timeliness as well, and that recognition, I think Warren talked about it, that actually to be able to scope and define and take into account all of this pre-market engagement, you do need to add a bit more time to the procurement process. And there is a lot in the new procurement reforms that talk about planning and pipelines, so that the first opportunity, or the first time you hear about an opportunity, is not when the procurement process starts. It's 2 years till it gets out of its traps, and you can have those kind of conversations and those kind of gestational kind of ideas come to the fore. The other thing we would say is that there is an essential top-down approach that needs to be taken when you're procuring innovation, that this needs to come from the top of an organisation. So public sector bodies often are accused of working in silos, but actually you need a strategic leadership in the client to knit together not only financial objectives and legal risks, but also digital solutions. And that sort of strategic, innovative overview that will allow sort of the people that are actually going to do the day job to be released into those roles and to get going on those innovative sort of solutions. Because otherwise, unless you have that leadership, people will retrench into previous custom and practice because they don't feel empowered to do that. So just a little bit about the reforms, and I know that this is very UK centric, but my biggest issue about the reforms is that actually we could have done everything that we are doing now under the EU procurement rules. And really, what a lot of the transformative reforms that the UK are indulging in at the moment is procurement done well on a day-to-day basis. And for example, we have at the moment in the UK as well, we award tenders to the most economically advantageous tender. That we call it MEET. And as you will know, that is the best mix of price and quality. That is now changing to MAT, most advantageous tender. And a lot of commentators have been saying, well, this is going to release us to have a wider concept of value, to enable us to procure innovatively and to procure innovative solutions, to not just select on the lowest price. And what I always say if I hear that is, we've always been able to do that. And in fact, we have been encouraged since 2004 to do that. But look, let's not knock it. If central government is saying, do all of these things, and encouraging people to do that, and then people feel enabled to do that because it's as part of all of these reforms, then let's crack on and do that. Again, Rakesh mentioned this new competitive flexible procedure, and I think in the innovation space that'll be great because we will be able to I think clients will be encouraged to do presentations, demonstrations, all of those things that you really need to do to get your hands around as an innovative solution that you've never seen before. We were always able to do that. It's just that people didn't feel empowered to do that. So I think along with the art of the possible report that we've drafted, the reforms hopefully empower public sector bodies to go and procure innovation in a more effective manner, but also procure innovatively so that they don't scare off the startups and the SMEs and the micros who have solutions to offer government, but often don't know how to sort of get onto that glide path into government need. And I think that's all I wanted to say. I hope that's what I was expected to say, and I've finished at 11 o'clock, so my KPI on timekeeping has been met as well.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And it's from my perspective, it's really great to hear a lawyer speaking so passionately about reform procurement. I know, Lena, you've got some similar, and Jakob, some similar contacts. Thank you so much, Sam, and to Rakesh and to Rebecca. And back to the chair, we're ready for discussions.
Thank you so very much for those presentation. It was really encouraging. So I think we are set for some curious questions maybe from the audience. Lina was first to press
Yes,
the
I'm the
button.
first. So thanks a lot for great presentations, very inspiring. And how has the reception been in terms of the report? I've read it, I think it's very good. And I mean, what are people thinking? Are they like, finally someone says how it is? Or like, who are these maniacs? We cannot do it like that. I mean, what is the reception?
I could give you the IPEC view, Rebecca, and then please do jump in. It's I mean, we were delighted to commission the work, and Rebecca and team have done a brilliant job. And you know, on the Connected Places Catapult, it's the most downloaded report we've ever had. So the demand there has been
Great.
incredible. And what's really encouraging is I'm going into meetings now with senior level officers, and they're quoting the report back to me without me saying anything. So I think Rebecca and team have done a
Fantastic.
brilliant job.
I was just going to come in and add, I think that what strikes me from the report, and also how Rebecca you described it, is it's kind of like it's a moment of rebooting the profession with that kind of you now have permission to think more creatively, although you could do this before. And that's why you know, quite provocatively, I'm sort of describing this as a renaissance, and bringing together like those kind of more nuanced skill sets between digital and commercial, because the fact in the UK that there is this competitive flexible procedure, it's so important to take a design-led and user-centered approach to understanding what is the art of the possible in creating that procedure to deliver the best outcomes. So I think, yeah, there's a really nice kind of intersection between digital skills and commercial skills fit for the 21st century.
Any other questions or thoughts? Len, welcome.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks everybody for a very interesting series of talks today. Rakesh, can I go back to one thing you mentioned which caught my interest because of my day job as opposed to the ETIN work with you. You mentioned an initiative you had just kicked off with a series of universities, kind of bringing them into the system and trying to, well, exactly this is my question. What exactly is the role of the universities within this? Is it capability building or is it something else?
Yes, thank you, Leonard. Great question. So what we're doing through IPEC, we're funding some budgets for this, and we set up this I guess coalition called IPEC Research. And the main purpose of it is we want to create some objectivity. So some of the objectivity is around where are the challenges when it comes to innovation and procurement, and really get into nuances, you know, get into specific themes. You know, is it in transport? Is it in health? Who's doing it well? Who's not doing it well? And if you're doing it well, how do we evaluate benefits realization? So that's one aspect or two aspects. A third aspect is one area that we really need to address is transparency around procurement. And at the moment, and I did it as a buyer, you know, I'd have a large tier one contract and I'd be buying some stuff underneath it. So as a result, that tier one contract would be the transparency, i.e. we spent £1 million on tech solutions through company A, but actually we've brought in a whole lot of other people under company A, but no one even knows about it. Or we talk about how much do we spend on innovation? How do we define innovation? Yeah, so you can't just type R&D and see how many contracts have been issued that have R&D, or how many patents do you have issued, because that's invention, it's not just innovation. So we're trying to work with them to say, how can we create more transparency and openness around how much is being spent on procurement, on innovation through procurement, and how much more could be spent. So we're really hoping to use this not just to shift policy, not just to make practical differences, but also continuously shift policy. So yeah, if you want to get involved, please do drop me a note and
I've
we'll get you involved.
sent you a LinkedIn invite, so I'll chat with you there.
Perfect.
While you are thinking of other question, I actually have one by myself, because another work theme within ETIN is actually innovation ecosystem building, and you say that you put a lot of engagement in pre-market engagement with startups and scale-ups. How do you reach out to those startups and scale-ups who are not the usual suspects, as you say? What kind of channels do you have to reach out, especially on local level? I guess that can be a challenge, or?
Do you want to go, Rebecca, or?
Well, I mean, I can give you the legal kind of framework, but maybe Warren, Rakesh, Sham, you might have some actual examples. But I mean, in terms of reaching out to locals, you can reach them however you want to around kind of local adverts, social media, local networks of people. So I think often in kind of formalized procurement processes, such as we're talking about for the UK government, people think you have to do everything in writing and it has to be auditable. Now, certain stages, that's right. But in terms of appealing to startups or whatever, it's however they communicate and do business that you would need to go to. So I think that's why you also need some time, isn't it? Because you do need to spot those channels of communication and make sure that you are getting to who you need to get to, whether it's on a local or a national level. I don't know if Rakesh or Warren wants to come in here or on a case study or whatever.
Sure. And unless Warren, can I go and then you go? Yep. Yep. Sure. So I think far too often what happens is a contract comes up for renewal, and then the time's already tight. So you say, let's just stick with the people that we have, and then to validate that, you do a pre-market engagement, which validates that there's no one else in the market. So, and I'm being a little bit cynical here, but that sometimes happens because of just bad planning. So I think what we need to do is really think wide and far as to how can I be a better category manager? What's going on in the marketplace that perhaps I need to think about in 2, 3, 4 years' time? So you're starting to think about your future pipeline, not the one that you've got in 6 months' time. And then as a result of that, you need to create, and I said this to my team, is not just getting it out there isn't enough. You've got to have a comms plan. So we used to do comms plans like marketing plans for procurement calls. So suddenly you're working with the Department of Trade and Industry that could be engaging with people in Israel, the Far East, or in anywhere else. We're working with London and Partners who have their own ecosystem. We're then working with local media publications. We're working on LinkedIn. So suddenly there'll be someone in my team that will say, we've got diversity of thought here. We haven't got the same old ideas. And suddenly you then use R&D and testing to see whether it's valid or not. And then you take it forward. So yeah, you've got to be open to say, we haven't got a clue. Let's go far and wide. We're desperate.
Yeah, I'll just build on absolutely what you said, Rakesh, there. I think that, so a couple of things. We often see a bit of a neglect on the contract management side of things. So once a contract's been awarded, it's like the procurement people thinking, oh my goodness, thanks, I wasn't taking the call, on to the next procurement. And so actually the fundamental role of the contract manager should be, from day one, you know you're planning for your exit, and you're actually supporting the sourcing folks to have an ongoing engagement of a strategic nature with the market. And that can be at several levels, both from an organizational perspective. This is what us as an organization are trying to achieve over the next 5 years. These are our priorities, these are our constraints, down to a specific kind of program or mission. This is what we're trying to achieve to support the organization, and then down to specific procurement. So you're actually, the market should be very intimately aware of what you're trying to do. And so that's one thing. And then also, so that requires a more holistic view of how the commercial life cycle works. And I think, to Rakesh's point also, we see so often market engagement theatre. It's all broadcast. People are just doing it to tick the box rather than it being a genuine sharing of problems, engagement, and being all ears and listening to what the market can suggest, and go to where the market is. Civic tech meetups, bureaucracy hacks, and other kind of places where you're not kind of saying, come to our room and listen to us in a theatre style. It's actually get involved with the community of entrepreneurs and practitioners.
Fantastic, and that's very much our experiences as well, Lina. That's actually how we met Warren and John when we discussed this, how to engage the startups and scale-ups in those issues. We have another hand from Abhay. Please welcome to the stage. If you're talking, I can say you're on mute. I can't see you.
Hello.
Hello. Very
Greetings to
welcome.
all.
What's your question?
It is regarding the I just want to request to throw some light over the pooling procurement of these buses as we are doing in India.
Sorry, I missed the last bit. There's something procurement. Could you just
Hello.
repeat it, Abhay? Yeah, could you repeat the question, please, Abhay?
Sorry, Rikesh. It is regarding the pooled procurement of these e-buses, as we are doing. Some of the states are doing at the central level with the help of the Niti Aayog in India. Can you throw some light over that? How what are the pros and cons regarding that?
Yeah, and I'll give it a really high level view and happy to have a separate conversation if you'd like. But firstly, you've got to think about, are you owning the buses? Are you going to be bringing operators in? Are you running a franchise model? So at a high level, strategically, who's going to be owning those buses and running them? And I think once you've decided that, the capex on energy is massive. So if you want to start charging those buses up, it's going to cost a lot of money. So who's going to be investing in the capital infrastructure? And then, of course, how do you manage the operational running of those services? So there's lots of different considerations. More than happy to have a separate conversation on the procurement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Any other thoughts?
I think, Jacob, one other point, if I may,
Yeah.
is the route to scale doesn't always have to be you buying something. Sometimes it could be a policy change. Or it could be so the public sector has a lot of power and lots of levers. So sometimes the market might come up with something where there isn't a market failure, which you thought there was. So there are lots of other tools that the public sector can also use.
Thank you. Lina?
Yeah, I'm also wondering, when we're talking about scaling and spreading the solutions, you were mentioning, of course, that startups and scale-ups is part of the solution there, probably. How are you communicating about the IP rights in procurement? That has been a tradition, at least in Sweden, that the IP rights tend to stay with the customer, which doesn't then create incentives for the startups and scale-ups to scale the solution, or it can even actually hinder a scaling. Is that the same in the UK, and how have you dealt with that? And you're on mute, Rikesh.
I was going to say Rebecca or Warren wanted to go. I can share an case study I've had, but I'll let others have a go.
Rebecca, do you want to come in? I'm happy to give a view. Yeah.
No, please do.
Okay. So in via most of the what's called the small business, the Small Business Research Initiative, which is mainly around R&D based pre-commercial procurement. Part of the participation criteria is that actually the buying entity says that we won't take any of the IP, that vests entirely in you. And so, yeah, that I've seen that being used pretty liberally across the UK. I'm not sure if that's similar in other contexts, such as it's the same letters but in a slightly different order in the US. I think it's the SRBI in the US, where something like that, where I think they may take the same approach. But I think that's an important part of allowing for that exploitation to exist in the innovators side of the camp.
Thanks. Lina, it's an old hand you have, isn't it?
No, I have many hands. This is a new one. I have. I could talk about this forever now when I get going a bit. In terms of scalability, and is there any way that you kind of incorporate, for example, criterias or selection criterias that has something to do with scalability and the ability of the companies to actually scale their solution? And if so, I would be incredibly interested in hearing that. I just pinged you the Rikesh and Rebecca and Sam in a LinkedIn post where I've written extended abstract about incorporating scalability into procurement. So that's kind of a little bit of a special interest of mine. So I would love to hear about your experiences.
I mean, it's a bit like the IP stuff, which is why I'll let Warren answer it, which is it's very kind of project specific and quite detailed, but we're just doing an innovations partnership at the moment where the contracting authority wants an IT platform to deliver something. Part of that will be part of the criteria is, or one of the criterion is commercialization, whereby the provider will still own all of the IP, but will offer a rebate. They're going to let a framework agreement which other similar contracting authorities can access, and they will then commercialize that to other contracting authorities and get a rebate. So the scalability has a time frame to it. They have been asked to put a business plan to scaling that solution and projections on rebates and income back to the contracting authority. And that's underpinned by a risk register. So I don't know if that's probably a bit too much detail, but there is, we're doing something at the moment where their version of scalability is being able to flog what they co-create, or not co-create, but create to others. So that's it's maybe about 20% of the overall criteria. So I think that's actually quite a big part of what they're looking for. And I think that's because they figure that they're going through some pain and they want others to avoid that and take advantage of their thinking. So
thanks.
I was just going to come in on that point as well, Lena, that kind of several approaches that I've seen through my own experience, but also observations elsewhere, is certainly like the CivTech Scotland approach to SBRI pre-commercial. Part of their evaluation criteria is demonstrate how you're, as the solution developer, you're thinking about how to scale that beyond perhaps the quite specific problem solving that you might be thinking about, and also to kind of almost strip away some of the specifics about that problem, that it might be, well, actually your technology could have multiple applications in other contexts by just, peeling away the very specific thing that you're trying to do here, but obviously not throwing that away. That's one thing. What was the other? There was another thing which now I've completely forgotten. I should have wrote it down. But yeah, I think also no, that was it. I have forgotten. I'll come back to it if I remember.
So just taking that one and the previous IP one, right? IP, I've got to say, my organization was bonkers in the past. The set agreement was we own all the IP, and I said that doesn't work for innovation. So we had to just completely redraft procurement documents when it came to my team. So that was a tough. I'm making it sound easy. It was an impossible conversation at the beginning, but then we worked through what that meant. In terms of scalability, the notion that I try to apply is the Amazon philosophy, which is you sort of start with the hypothesis, but then you look forward 10 years, and then you work back, and you're going to be iterating along the way, ultimately to get that 10-year hypothesis. And that meant that you're designing several things. First, you're designing the internal culture that accepts that this is going to take a while. But secondly, you're designing the procurement, which may or may not scale, because after 6 weeks, it may die. But also in 10 years' time, I may still be buying something through it. So quite often we design the procurements, and that's where the IPP was really good for us. But it doesn't always have to be an IPP. There are other routes. And that worked really well. So I didn't do anything in my team unless there was a technical trial that we wanted to explore something. I didn't do anything unless it scaled, because that was my conditions of success right at the beginning. Otherwise, why am I doing it? So that was a challenge that I put on my organization.
just
just
so Warren. Yeah, exactly.
I just remembered the thing that I forgot. Sorry, I know Lena and Jakob, you're familiar with the RSA report from Design Thinking to System Change and Think Like a System, Act Like an Entrepreneur. But I'm just putting it in the chat here for others' benefits, because within that report, they're talking about the role of the problem owner to help the solution developer to anticipate the barriers to scaling and actually working together to overcome some of those things. I love the way that the report writers describe procurement and other kind of barriers as kind of the system immune response to innovation. So it's very worth a read, that report, which I'll put in chat.
And can I just come back on Warren's point, which I think is a really valid one, is that what this then shows is suddenly your ecosystem to scale gets more complicated, because you might be having conversations with your finance director, or you might be having conversations with your sponsorship team. So suddenly you're having conversations with people that you don't normally have, because what you're trying to do is secure funding to actually scale downstream. And they'll be saying to you, this stuff's not even proven. We've never bought this stuff. How can I give you some money in the business planning rounds that this is going to be proven? So you've got to demonstrate to them that this thing's scalable, and you've got enough trust from them that you're doing the right things.
Thanks. That point that Rikesh just made. So when I was in my presentation, when I was talking about creating the enabling environments within your organization, and also Rebecca's point around this needs to come from the top to provide that enabling environment and permission. The C-suite functions of chief digital, chief commercial, chief legal, chief finance, etc., if they're not aligned on what their organizational objectives and strategy is, and understanding like the traditional constraints that might be put in place, for example, something so simple, right? This block of finance and budget has been dedicated to CapEx, whereas actually we need it to be an OpEx model to support more, consume and pay as you use models. If that hasn't happened, then actually the poor people trying to do this and figure it out on a day-to-day basis, their hands are already tied before they get to the. I think there's a really important part of making sure that alignment starts at the very top and flows all the way down to the day-to-day practitioners.
It's so interesting. Thank you very much. And we have yet another question here from Abe, please.
Hello. Yes. Actually, this is regarding the evaluation system by peers, which has been developed by the UNECE itself for regarding sustainability. So how we are going to how this program for sustainability cities is going to collaborate with them. PIERS. It's developed by the UNECE itself, and the full form you can say that PPP and infrastructure evaluation and rating system.
Anyone familiar with this question?
Okay, no issue. Actually, it has been developed. Yeah, it has been developed by the UNECE PPP Secretariat, I think, and they had developed it something like to rate the infrastructure project vis-a-vis SDG.
Okay. What we can do, maybe if you can mail your question to me and Emanuela, we can see if we can find the right person to answer, because I'm afraid no one of us actually know yet. We are approaching past, but we have a new question from Jerion, please.
Yes, I was just wondering, because when I was listening to Rebecca's presentation, you were talking about this innovative procurement part that a lot of people want to innovate the procurement process. And I think it was interesting because last seminar, the second seminar, we had a presenter from Norway who was talking about innovation procurement. And then at UNECE, it's called Innovation-Enhancing Procurement. And then you talk about innovation-friendly procurement. So I just wanted to throw in the vocabulary question and just be like, yeah. I mean, innovation-enhancing procurement is quite specific and targeted to wanting to enhance innovation. But is this a common confusion in the field that people also think about wanting to innovate the procurement process, or what are maybe ways to, I don't know, distinguish or make that clearer?
Absolutely, and I think that's where I started off my presentation on the report, with the actually we sat down, and often the procurement of innovation is then confused with the innovation of the competition design that you use to procure the innovative product. So and not only that, but you can start talking about one thing and get a procurement person in the room and it slides into the other thing as well. So I think your point is well made. As a lawyer, I'm always very interested in vocabulary and taxonomy. And I know that people in IPEC, and Rakesh might be smiling at this, have very strong views, particularly from Innovate UK, as to whether it should be the procurement of innovation or innovation procurement. So we haven't, I mean, I suppose in all developing kind of agendas, we feel our way in vocabulary, don't we? But we have that Norwegian issue as well in the UK.
Yes, and that's something to work upon. And Emanuela, last famous words from Emanuela.
Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to get back to Abhay's question. I think I understood what you meant. It's the peers, the UNECE PPP infrastructure evaluation and rating system, peers. So I'm happy to include a link to that in the chat. And just for your information, we have our committee on innovation, competitiveness, and PPPs next week, where we will indeed be talking about innovation-enhancing procurement, PPPs, all for the circular economy transition. So I invite you to join that, and hopefully, we can elaborate and discuss more on that topic. I'll post the link in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Emanuela. And now we are approaching past, and this is very, very interesting as always. And we will continue those discussions. So we will invite you all to new sessions after the summer. We are planning the actual dates, but it will be really, really interesting. Just to want to give you some words of what I take with me from this seminar. First of all, I think it was fun notion. Are we procuring innovation, or are we procuring innovatively? I think that's worth notion, that we actually can procure in different ways and don't limit ourselves by what we think are limitations. Pre-market engagement.
Jakob, you're breaking up.
To think
completely.
Of how we are doing the procedures. And then last but not least, mindset and culture is key, and building capacity and skill sets to make it happen. So thank you very much for this seminar, and thank you to Warren and John and the team. Really, really rewarding. Do you want to say something, Lina, before we close down?
No, not more than it was great discussions and gives a lot of input into this policy report, etc. that we are preparing. So we'll keep you all in the loop there.
Yes.
Thank you also from our side. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for this interactive and engaging session, and we look forward to continuing the discussion in the months to come. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.